Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. I'm Kris. Right off the bat, this is going to have to be broken into two parts just because of length. Anything over 25 minutes, I like to break it down. But this is the American Revolution, Battle of Saratoga, 1777. It's from History Rebels. This is the 6th video in their 11 video series. So, just so we're all clear. You see me click that thumbs up, subscribe, completely free, helps me out tremendously. You can click on the thanks button and donate to the channel. Request a video. If you do, your name sponsors that video. Outside of that, let's get into it.
In 1777, the war is entering its second bloody year. Both sides have been learning important lessons from the war, first ignited at Lexington and conquered. Battles like Bunker Hill have proved that the Americans can stand up against professional British troops, while the failed invasion of Canada showed both loyalist resolve and how unforgiving the countryside could be for marching armies. By spring, the British are finally ready to start significant and ambitious offensive campaigns, while other European powers look on with increasing interest. Colonial battlefield defeats in 1776 had persuaded Washington of two things. Firstly, that he would not be able to replicate Bunker Hill with a war of posts, as the British would now simply outflank his positions. And secondly, that he must now pursue a Fabian strategy in New York, avoiding large-scale battles in favor of smaller, indirect skirmishes to wear down the British. Although Congress is divided on how to progress the war, Washington is able to run military affairs as he sees fit. His army must contend with severe supply, financial, and enlistment issues, but with their control of much of the country, key orders can also be communicated in hours or days, and supplies and reinforcements can move quickly and without harassment. Washington's goal for the year is simple: maintain independence while making the war both as costly and futile for the British as he can. Although the British maintain military and financial supremacy, their situation in 1777 is nonetheless daunting. They control only one significant port in the 13 colonies, New York, and must fight simultaneously both a guerrilla and conventional war thousands of miles from home. For General Howe, the commander of British land forces in North America, following the defeats at Trenton and Princeton, he now believes that he does not have the manpower to pacify and garrison large swathes of territory. But he also believes that he will not have to in order to force Congress to sue for peace. General Howe sees the center of gravity for the revolution to revolve critically around both Washington and Congress, and he therefore plans in 1777 to destroy both of them by moving against the capital, Philadelphia. By doing so, he believes that Washington will be forced to defend the city, giving Howe the opportunity to defeat the Continentals in a decisive final battle, and then capture the seat of the rebel government to cement his victory. But the British command is not unified under its commander-in-chief, General Howe. 3,000 miles away, Lord George Germain, the Secretary of State for the Colonies and the minister responsible for the British war effort, is considering a second plan put forward by General John Burgoyne. Burgoyne is an aggressive commander, well liked by his troops, but he is also arrogant and desperate to take an independent command in North America. His proposal is not new, and he plans for 3 columns to converge on Albany, with Burgoyne leading an army from Canada southwards. The theory is that by controlling the Hudson River, they can isolate and besiege the more rebellious New England colonies. But no one specifies a plan for subsequent operations into New England, and because of the logistic and communication challenges between the armies, the plan is ambitious. Crucially for many officers in the field, it remains unclear how exactly control of the Hudson River will deliver the knockout blow to the colonists envisioned by politicians in London. For both Howe and Burgoyne's competing plans, it is Lord Germain's job to reconcile the two. But he is indecisive and far from both the battlefield and his commander-in-chief in New York. Exchanging letters takes months, which makes close coordination and flexible decision-making impossible. Germain approves both plans, believing that Howe will be able to move north and support Burgoyne after capturing Philadelphia. But this is wildly optimistic. By the time Burgoyne reaches Quebec in May to lead an army south from Canada, he receives a letter from General Howe with the reality of the situation. Howe informs him that he is unlikely to be able to support the push to Albany, removing a critical piece of the strategy before the campaign has even begun. Despite these problems, Burgoyne still commands a significant force in Canada. He has approximately 10,000 men at his disposal, and he plans to take 8,000 south while sending 1,800 men down the Mohawk River as a diversionary force. The Northern Department of the Continental Army consists of 7,000 men under the command of General Schuyler. Since the beginning of the year, Schuyler has been nervously asking for assistance. His forces are, like in Washington's army, low on both supplies and morale. Burgoyne begins moving south in June and marches towards the formidable Fort Ticonderoga, which, due to its strategic location, is a crucial gateway and line of defense into New England. The fort is considered almost impregnable, and the British anticipate that taking it will be one of the major battles of the campaign. But General Schuyler and the fort's commander, General St. Clair, had been pessimistic about their chances of holding it. Inexplicably, provisions have not been gathered, militias have not been called out, and key hills overlooking Ticonderoga have been left unfortified. Screening the main British army's arrival on the 2nd of July, Burgoyne's Indian allies start to harass any Continentals that leave the safety of the fort. The Indians provide invaluable scouting and raiding services for the British, acting like cavalry in the dense wilderness. Their presence also strikes fear in the 3,000-strong Continental garrison, and defeatism spreads through the ranks and leadership. When the British take hold of hills overlooking the fort, St. Clair orders a withdrawal south. The abandonment of the fort sends shockwaves through both camps, with Washington and Congress incensed by the loss of such a crucial position without a fight. Washington quickly dispatches the energetic Benedict Arnold to support Schuyler's troubled command. For Burgoyne, both his confidence in the army and disdain for the Continentals soars. The British begin their pursuit and catch up twice to the Continental rearguard, defeating them in minor engagements as they push south, reaching the abandoned Fort Edward on the 29th of July. Although the campaign is going well for Burgoyne, he repeatedly pauses the advance south, to the confusion of some of his officers, and waits for critical supplies from Canada, including horses, wagons, and fodder. His supply and logistical problems are mounting and are being compounded by Continental troops who continuously cut down trees that block the narrow roads and trails south. When war broke out in 1775, tribes in the Northern Theatre were quickly embroiled into the fighting. For these tribes, their relationship with their European neighbours was often fraught with tension and conflict. Foreign disease alone had more than half the size of many of the tribes, after coming into contact with smallpox and other illnesses. By the 18th century, even the most powerful Indian group in the
Come on. Can it be pointed out that the smallpox blankets issue was not started by the Americans? That was the British. Americans get flack for it. Shouldn't have done it. It's a terrible thing to do. But that was the British that did it first. And it's something that always gets linked to the Americans when they were trying to get the Indians, natives out of the territory of the states at the time after the war. But this was something that had been done by the British at first.
north, the Six Nations of the Iroquois Confederacy counted only around 10,000 people compared to 2.4 million colonists. The organization of the tribes varied, with some, like the Iroquois, subdividing their tribes into clans. For the Iroquois, these were then led by clan mothers, who would select clan representatives to serve as diplomats or war chiefs. The small size of the tribes limited their ability to raise large armies for war, with the Mohawks, for example, only being able to field warriors in the hundreds. The size of the forces also affected their strategy. Offensive operations utilized raiding parties to strike hard and fast against an opponent. Psychological warfare was widely employed to destabilize and break an enemy's morale. Attacks at dawn and scalpings were common practice. Indian warriors that were captured in battle, particularly by the Iroquois, could face brutal torture. Total war was also used, with raiding parties destroying all in their path. If anyone was spared, they could be incorporated into the victor's clan to replenish numbers, a practice that brought a number of European settlers into tribal life. Colonial propaganda often exaggerated the violence, giving Indians a reputation for savagery and mutilation, which helped to create a common enemy and justified the seizure of land. In reality, the Indians were no more brutal than their British and colonial counterparts, who regularly destroyed entire Indian villages and their inhabitants. On the battlefield, Indian tactics favoured ambushing and hitting an enemy from multiple directions or at the flanks. These tactics incorporated, as needed, elements of advance, retreat, and firepower. Warriors fought as individuals, working independently but towards common goals. Fighting against European foes in wooded terrain, an Indian warrior would often wait for the flash of a musket before charging and closing for the kill, using clubs, knives, and tomahawks. They sought to gain personal recognition through acts of bravery or by killing individual enemies. This made the act of fighting and war more personal, reflecting cultural values of honor and courage. During a battle, war parties would retreat at the threat of large casualties, and for individuals, there was no shame in running away to fight another day, only in surrendering to an enemy force. From the outset of the American Revolution, many tribes sought to side with the British, who promised to honor Indian land claims and limit further colonial westward expansion. While many others remained neutral, some sided with the Continentals because of existing strong relations, or in the belief that they would secure favorable terms after the war. Within the Iroquois Confederacy, the Mohawks, Seneca, Onondagas, and Cayugas became important British allies, as the Oneidas and Tuscaroras became for the Continentals. The divided Confederacy, for the most part, avoided combat against one another and provided their European allies with critical scouting, raiding, and intelligence gathering services. Whatever the outcome of the war, the loss of land, cultural identity, and independence would inevitably continue for the besieged tribes of North America. Further west, British General St. Leger has been moving with his 1,800-strong diversionary force along the Mohawk River. He arrives at Fort Stanwix on the 2nd of August, and unlike at Ticonderoga, this time the Continental garrison makes a stand. As the siege commences, an 800-strong Patriot and Indian force is organized to relieve the garrison and marches west to Fort Stanwix. But St. Leger is informed of their movements and sends a combined party of 500 loyalists and Indians to intercept. For the militias now converging on each other, many of the men on both sides were relatives or knew each other as neighbors. Likewise for the Indians, the tribes on both sides were from the Iroquois nation. The Seneca chiefs, fighting with the loyalists, select a ravine to ambush the approaching Patriot force at Oriskany, placing loyalist militias across a stream and Indian warriors on the flanks. the approaching Patriot commander, General Nicholas Herkimer, has been hesitant to advance. But his brother is a known loyalist fighting with Saint Leger, and Herkimer is soon accused by his men of also being a loyalist, which convinces him to push forward. As the colonists enter the ravine, the slaughter begins. The Patriots fight bravely, but attacked from all sides. Within 30 minutes, half of the 800 men have been killed or flee. As the fighting continues, a sortie from the fort attacks the now empty Loyalist camp, forcing the ambush to eventually be called off. But the damage has been done, and 385 Patriot militiamen lay dead, with another
I got tired of swinging back and forth.
80 wounded and captured. For the Continentals, despite the disaster, the garrison at Fort Stanwix does not submit to calls to surrender. Soon afterwards, Benedict Arnold brings a further relief column west, and on his approach, he's able to spread rumours in Saint Leger's camp that the approaching Continental force is larger than it really is. The British fall for the ruse and end the siege, falling back to Canada and abandoning their advance on Albany.
The first few years, Arnold was a rock star, which makes what he does that much worse. He got screwed over, yeah. But in the end, he shouldn't have done what he did. He shouldn't have done what he did. Yes. Shouldn't have did what he done. Shouldn't have done what he did. Why does both of them sound incorrect?
General Burgoyne soon finds out about Saint Leger's withdrawal. A letter from General Howe also finally confirms that he will not be able to assist the campaign, critical information that Burgoyne keeps secret from his senior officers. To add to the isolation, the majority of the Indians begin to leave the army, following both tensions over alleged atrocities and Burgoyne's misunderstanding and mishandling of the relationship. In an attempt to improve his continuous supply issues, Burgoyne sends a detachment of 1,400 German troops to Bennington to capture cattle and fodder, but they are met by 2,500 Continentals under General John Stark, who kill 200 and capture a further 700 Germans. As August turns into September, both armies now have approximately 6,500 men. At this critical juncture, Burgoyne has a decision to make. He can fall back to Ticonderoga for the winter or push on to Albany. Despite having every reason to turn back, Burgoyne insists that his orders from London are clear, and he continues the advance. At the same time, Congress replaces the dispirited General Schuyler with General Horatio Gates, a cold and arrogant former British Army officer who brings the Continentals closer to Burgoyne and digs in south of Saratoga on heights blocking the road to Albany. With news of the success at Bennington and rumours of an Indian invasion following the Battle of Oriskany, thousands of militia reinforcements are also starting to swell the Continental ranks. The two forces are now on a collision course at Saratoga.
We're going to go ahead and stop it there. They're on a collision course for Saratoga. So, slide myself right back on up. No. Okay, so this is part one. Come on, there you go. This is part one, and we will be back with part two. But until then, get ready, get your popcorn. Have a good day, have a good night. I hit the wrong button. We're going to pretend that didn't happen. Have a good day, have a good night.